Aloha and welcome to Breaking Even. I am doing way more than breaking even as I am in Hawaii again last week for the Century Tournament of Champions in Maui, this week in Honolulu for the Sony Open. And while I'm out here, I'm working, but I'm also managing to have a little bit of fun. I've been surfing. I've been whale watching. I have swam with big sea turtles. And who knows what else. At the same time, I'm trying to make a little bit of money because that's what we do here at Breaking Even. Jonathan Coachman, he joins us to help us lay down some prop bets and some head-to-head battles on the Sony Open this week. And of course, Guy Adami, he joins us. We're going to update some of the plays that we had in the markets over the past couple of weeks, which, by the way, if you were paying attention, you should have made money. And that's what we like to do. We like to make money. But as we do at the beginning of every show, we start with my man, Barney Alary. Have you, Barney, made it through the snow? You brought the snow with you from Canada all the way down to Tennessee.
Boy, for those who don't know, most of Tennessee, actually probably all of Tennessee, and I think every square foot of Kentucky as well. Last week was Snowmageddon or Snowpocalypse. It was a 10-hour snow event here and might be the biggest snowfall in one day ever recorded. We must have had a solid 4 to 6 inches, and other places I think had 8 inches or more. And for Tennessee, that's a lot. And then 4 days later, it rained and it's all gone.
Well, it was actually, I saw it was a record for Nashville Airport, like 6 inches or something.
That's right.
So that kind of makes me want to say, shut your mouth. So I want to start, Barn, because you said you got a couple of shut your mouth. So give me one of your shut your mouths.
Well, here's a little shut your mouth. Did you notice that Cameron Smith, going into the third round, going into Saturday, he's got a 3-shot lead, Ned, a 3-shot lead, and he shoots 9 under. Pretty good. Only to realize that now he's tied for the lead because John Rahm shot 12 under to shoot 9 under with a 3-shot lead. And you know what? Well, no, not only did you not amplify your lead, no, now actually you're tied for the lead. Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. He said at the beginning of the week after opening with 8 under, he said, I'm probably going to need 3 more of these to win. We kind of scoffed at him, but boy, was he right. He now is a top 10 player in the world, by the way. So congratulations to Cameron Smith. We can get into some of the analysis of last week if we want, but I'm kind of looking ahead, Barn, to the Sony Open. But give me some of your, I guess, closing thoughts on Kapalua and the opening event of the PGA Tour in 2022.
Ned, I believe if my math is right, well, let me put you this way, among other things. I'm no mathematician, but if you shoot 18 under for 72 holes, you've birdied 1 out of every 4 holes. You shoot 24 under for 72 holes, you birdied 1 out of every 3 holes. Last time I checked, 72 holes, half of that is 36. He was 2 shots away from birdieing all of the even holes or all of the odd holes. Take your pick. And if that doesn't make you also want to come around and say, shut your mouth. But also, I believe he had 31 birdies and 3 eagles. And Ned, it got me to thinking how many millions of golfers out there on the planet are not going to get 31 birdies for the year. For the year. And he had 31 birdies on a golf course that he played as if he was 12 years old, as if he's known the place since he was 12 years old. But now, do you want my number one shut your mouth?
Hit me with it.
My number one shut your mouth is that Cameron Smith says that he tends to be a little lazy in the range. He says that normally he hits wedges, hits some irons, then he's ready to go home. But he said that he decided instead to intensify his range sessions and practice hitting his driver a little bit more. So he said he made it a point to stay in the range for an extra 10 to 15 minutes and hit some balls. 10 to 15 minutes. Are you kidding me? He calls that intensifying his range practice. Ned, did you know that me and you are 10, 15 minutes away from having this historic record? Unbelievable. Bryson DeChambeau would hit balls for 4 hours. Vijay Singh would hit balls for 6 hours. Ben Hogan would hit balls for 10 hours. 10, 15 minutes, and you win, and you shoot 34 under? Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. Talk to me like that. 15 minutes, I'm going to hit a few extra drivers, and that gets me the first win, gets me into the top 10.
Yep.
and has me breaking scoring records. Imagine what if he did stay for an hour.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. That does make me want to say, shut your mouth. Good gracious.
I might have one more parting thought before we let go of the Kapalua, and it's this, Ned. If you're John Rahm, tell me what feels worse. Having a 6-shot lead at the Memorial and being told, no, you tested positive for COVID, you need to withdraw. Or having the best score to par at East Lake and no, because of the staggered start, you're not going to win. Or shooting 33 under and a guy clips
I don't
you.
know. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Ned, here's another one for you. John Rahm had one bogey for the week. Well, I'm real sorry for you, pal. That's one bogey too many. And Ned, before we close the door in Kapalua one more time, what about Matt Jones?
Yes.
That Matt Jones, what if Cameron Smith was tested positive for COVID and he's not going to play? What if John Rahm decides, nah, you know what? I want to play with my sweet little baby again. Just a little bit. I'm going to take the week off. Matt Jones has the PGA Tour record under par and wins by 6. And in the meantime, no one but his wife and his mom even knows that he even played in the event.
He shot 23 under over the last 36 holes, Barn.
Shut your mouth.
That's what I'm saying. All right, let's move over. Let's hop over here to Honolulu. Interesting golf course, completely opposite of what we saw in Kapalua last week, where there was 440 feet of elevation change. There's like 2 feet of elevation change here. Golf course has had a lot of rain. There is actually some thick rough. Scores could be, we'll have to see. Again, though, if there's no wind and there's not supposed to be, the scores are going to be probably really low. I had a fun time this morning, Barn, riding the golf course with Andy North, who is part of our broadcast team for ESPN. And he was telling me all these old stories about playing with Nicholas and Trevino and where they would start the ball and playing in a Balata era with the wind versus today. Just a captivating and really fascinating study of how he looks at a golf course, how he used to look at a golf course, and just how technology really has changed the game, which leads me to probably the man who was going to garner the most attention this week. He's not here anymore. Bryson DeChambeau has decided to withdraw from the event. What's your take?
Ned, let's introduce a new segment here early in the year. Is it something or nothing? And so Bryson DeChambeau cites a wrist injury, and here he is that for the last 2 years has been working out feverishly and been increasing his club head speed 130 plus miles an hour. And now all of a sudden, the collision of all of those accumulated drives and swinging out of his shoes, and suddenly, a little twinge in the wrist. And I'll be curious to see going forward if it's something or nothing. You remember Brooks Koepka had, I think, a left thumb injury several years ago, maybe before he won his first major, maybe it was after his first major. I forget. And we were concerned a little bit. I wonder if this is going to wind up being of any concern or not at all.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's nothing. Hopefully because he didn't swing well last week. So you could make a case that, hey, this is something to pay attention to because maybe he is injured and that's why he wasn't hitting the ball well. I didn't see him reference wrist pain or grab his wrist throughout the week. So I'm optimistic that it's one of those things that, he slept on it wrong or he got a little kink in it, or maybe it's just nothing. Maybe he didn't like the way he's hitting it and he needed to go home and get himself back together. I mean, that's kind of what the beginning of the year is for. So that wouldn't break my heart either. But he is not here. So guess who is now the highest ranked player in the field? Number 10 in the world, Cameron Smith.
Right.
Barn, before we go, 2 things. You have any parting notes?
No, but I think I know where you're going to. And if you're not,
yes.
Then I will.
Tim Rosefort. He was the best at what he did, and it wasn't even close. He was really the first insider, someone in the golf world who all the players, all the caddies, everybody trusted Tim. His Rolodex was as thick as a phone book because they knew that he could be trusted. And if you gave him a piece of information and it said off the record, then it was off the record. He was a genuine, authentic, fantastic human who always was trying to lift others. And a huge loss as he passed away just yesterday. And I've always missed seeing him at tournaments, watching him on the Golf Channel, but now knowing that we won't get to see him again, very, very sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but again, Ned, he got to share some of his insight with us and stuff, and leaves behind all sorts of magnificent memories. And as far as I know, no one has a bad word to say about the man, and he shall be missed.
Amen to that. Barn, on that note, Let's look ahead to brighter days. Let's look ahead to the Sony Open. Who do you favor here? Who do you like?
Well, Cameron Smith ain't bad.
Yeah, trying to go back-to-back. A couple of players have done that in the past. As I said, you'll hear later, my pick for the week with Jonathan Coachman. He's a Florida Gator, not a Georgia Bulldog, if that gives you any hint. And Hideki Matsuyama, he always seems to play pretty well around these parts. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the winner's circle.
I guess we'll see.
All right, Barn. You're the best, bud.
All right. Take care, Ned.
You looking for a vacation? Maybe somewhere you haven't been before, somewhere off the beaten path? Consider Mississippi. You can jump on their website, visitmississippi.org. They had the state fair going on just a couple of weeks ago. They had the PGA Tour in Jackson, Mississippi, the Sanderson Farms Championship. Cruising the Coast, the best automobile show in the country. Deion Sanders, Jackson State. They had 52,000 fans turn up last week at the Jackson State football game. There's so much to do in Mississippi. You can hit the coast. You can gamble a little bit, bet on the sports book, play golf. If you love music, the Grammy Museum, just check it out. Visit Mississippi.org. The markets have been tough lately. It's been hard to make a lot of money, even with the advice of Guy Adami and Dan Nathan and Danny Moses, who, by the way, have been fantastic. I hope you got in on their advice from the last 2 weeks, because if you did, you actually made money instead of getting smoked out in the markets. But another way that you can put a little cash in your pocket here on Breaking Even is with my guy, Jonathan Coachman, who's been throwing out some great picks on the golf side, as well as the football games that are going on. National championship game, he was so close. It was so close. Coach, how you doing, pal?
I'm doing good. I tell you what, in this whole sports betting thing that we do all the time, it never stops. You can go to NFL regular season, the national championship. Oh, now here's a golf tournament starting again now. So it's super busy. We never stop, but it's a whole lot of fun for sure.
You, at the beginning of the year, before one snap had been taken, picked Alabama to win the national championship. So as you're watching the game, are you emotionally invested in either team because you've made this bet, or is it just kind of business as usual and you just look at the score when it's all said and done?
No, we're heavily invested. I probably have the greatest job in America, that our bosses actually encourage us to bet real money on the picks that we give out, because then if you just start giving out picks and you're not actually betting on any of them, well, then eventually you're not going to care anymore. You'll be like, I'm just going to give them out to get it out of my way, and then move on down the road. So you almost have to be emotionally invested. Now, when I knew I had lost that bet was when I lost the second first-round draft pick at wide receiver who tore his ACL on a fantastic catch and throw. So if that wouldn't have happened, I truly believe the outcome would have been different, because he was unstoppable the first time and at the beginning of that game. But you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but that one, it really hurt, Ned.
Yeah, where it really hurt, you could see it throughout the game, was the timing of patterns. And these young receivers who are great talents, but they're going the wrong direction, or they're not thinking back shoulder. They're just running the route. They're not malleable enough, confident enough to say, I should cut this route off. They just run with the exact route that they're supposed to run. And meanwhile, quarterback Young is throwing it where he knows they should be, but it's not where they are.
That's a great point. And it's also the simple narrative that a lot of fans have, because they just either aren't in the business, they haven't been close to it, like guys like myself or you have, is they go, oh, just anybody can do it. Or just anybody can go out there and fill in for a All-American wide receiver. No, you got to have a feel for the game. Just like in golf, you might be a really good golfer that can hit in the middle of the club face, but do you have a feel for the game, that if you got a nice little dog leg to the left, that you'll be able to cut that corner and only have 90 yards out? Are you able to kind of draw it around the corner to stay away from the water? It's having a feel for the game. And that's what you don't have when you don't work with a quarterback, or you don't work with somebody very, very closely. And that's why ultimately Georgia wore down the Alabama defense, and you saw what happened in the fourth quarter. They just couldn't stop them, whether it was running or passing the football.
Well, as a husband of a national champion, 3-time SEC champion swimmer at the University of Georgia, my wife was going bananas.
I bet she was.
She's invested in that Georgia program, and has been. The athletic program has been since she graduated. So it was high times in our house. Even though I wasn't there, it was FaceTime and all this kind of stuff. It was great. It was great. Good to be a Georgia dog. Hey, speaking of feel the game, you know who had feel the game? Is our guy Cameron Smith. Are you kidding me? Sets the scoring record. And I'm interested to know from your perspective, was the Century Tournament of Champions, where it was just birdie after birdie with an occasional eagle. Was it fun to watch?
It was not for me, and I'm going to tell you why. Maybe it's just me being too much into the golf betting space now, but when you're picking a head-to-head matchup, for example, you want to have the ability, if you fall behind, that you can catch up. And it's very, very hard to do that on a course that's giving up 34 under par. Nobody was going back, maybe a couple of guys, but nobody was going backwards. So if you were in a head-to-head matchup and you were down by 2 or 3 shots on the first 4 or 5 holes, you had no chance to catch up. I don't like tournaments like that. I like tournaments where I have the chance to have a double bogey here or a bogey there, or on the 18th hole that I'm not fighting between an eagle and a birdie, but how about a little trouble? Well, if you hit it to the right down and then hit it to the right, there is no trouble on 18. So I don't particularly like tournaments that can go that high. But with that being said, I don't care if you're playing on a Muni or you're playing on one of the hardest courses in the world. 34 under par is still 34 under par. And that was crazy. And I also have to give him props because he had Jon Rahm that would not let up for the entire weekend. And he just stared him in the eye and he said, I'm going to be one better than you for the entire day on Sunday. And he did it against the number one player in the world. I thought that was remarkable.
Cameron Smith moves into the top 10, by the way, for the first time in his career. So congratulations to him. You know, this golf course that they played on last week, Kapalua Plantation Course, it's made for wind and big, heavy, hard wind coming off of the ocean. And so the fairways are huge. The greens are even bigger, and the greens are a little bit on the slower side because they have to be because they have so much undulation. And we had no wind, zero, not even like barely a poof. And so guys just crushed this place. I've found it a ton of fun because I love the scenery and I love offensive golf. I like defensive football, but it was a little redundant, right? At times it was for birdie, for eagle, for birdie. Like you just didn't see many bogeys, but it was, I hadn't thought about it from the betting side. Really interesting that of course you can't really ever catch up. This week we slide over to the Sony Open. We go from Maui to Honolulu. And this is a cool little old Seth Rayner golf course that was opened in like 1927. Really narrow. A lot of it does depend on how deep the Bermuda rough is. And then if the wind is going to blow. I was out on the golf course and there's going to be no wind this week. Maybe just a little bit of poof here and there, but nothing. So I'm expecting low scores. The rough, they've had a ton of rain. It rained for 72 straight hours last week. So if they don't cut it, we're going to see some pretty gnarly rough. And this golf course changes its demeanor with rough as much as it does with wind. Last year, it was like the 5th easiest golf course on the PGA Tour, but the year before, it was the 9th most difficult. And that only was because they had another half inch of rough. And as you know, Bermuda rough, ball goes straight to the bottom. It's so hard to play out of.
Can't find it, yeah.
And they had some wind. So I'm curious to see kind of where your mind ends on betting this tournament.
When you have tournaments like this and you have courses like this, the most important thing when you are trying to target a player that you want to bet on is accuracy. So I'm going to go straight to the iron numbers or the strokes gained approach or just look at really good iron players. So I look at a guy like Corey Connors. His number to win is a nice, attractive number, plus 2,500. That's kind of what I call the sweet spot for a really good player that's not an A player, but he's a really good B-plus player. You can get him in the plus 2,000 to plus 3,000. And what that means for the novice bettor is $100, you would win $2,500. But then I look at other guys like Russell Henley. People forget that he won here in his very first start on the PGA Tour in his career. So he loves this particular course. But I would look at certain guys. Hideki's playing. I thought he played really well last week. Sanjay played well last week. Cameron Smith. But I would not back Cameron Smith this week because the hardest thing to do on the PGA Tour is to do what?
Back to back.
Back to back. It never happens. That's what made what Tiger did so remarkable, that he won almost every single time that he walked out there. It's hard to do. So Cameron Smith is the betting favorite at plus 1,000. I never recommend betting anything below plus 1,000 ever on a winner. And also take your bet down just a little bit. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. And if you hit it, make it be like a lottery ticket and not something you're counting on for your bankroll.
Yeah, I think only a couple guys have gone back-to-back in this format, Century Tournament champions at Kapalua and then over to Sony. Els did it and somebody else that I'm missing, but only a couple of guys have done it.
Yeah. I can't remember who did it either, but it's such a hard thing to do because the two courses are so completely different.
Let me throw a name out at you.
Yeah.
Just because I happened to watch second half of the football game with his caddy and a couple of other caddies, and that's the good stuff. When you can really lock in and caddies are talking about who's playing well and who's doing what and what their expectations are for the year. And this is a guy that I personally like, but I have really been admiring how his game is progressing and evolving. And he's already been a FedEx Cup champion, but Billy Horschel.
It's so funny you bring his name up because no matter what he does, he never gets lumped in the conversation of the really, really top players. He played great last year. He won the match play. He then went overseas and really made a dent in the race to Dubai and played well over there. But for some reason, even though he won the FedEx Cup many years ago, it wasn't like recently. It was several years ago when it was
2014.
Yeah, it was still a $10 million prize, which is now it's $15 million. So I'm very bullish on Billy Horschel. I think sometimes he can get a little bit too like this, and I want to play so good, so badly. But I'd rather have a player like that cares on a Friday at the American Express or at Pebble or wherever, because, again, from the betting perspective, those are really key days. You want to have people that are laser focused every single round that say, you know what, today I'm only going to shoot a 69. That's my goal. And that's what Billy Horschel is all about. He is a dynamic competitor, and I love watching him play golf. And we'll see if he's ever going to get the respect that he deserves. But understand this, Ned, he's losing out on a lot of sponsorship dollars, a lot of things off the course, and I just don't know why. But on the course, he is a really, really good player.
Don't disagree with that analysis at all. And I like the player in a way who is a little wound tightly because we can relate to that guy on the golf course, right? I mean,
no doubt.
All right, let's go football.
Yeah.
Some interesting games, and God, there was some serious madness in the NFL this past week with how things shook out. 4 weeks ago, people were talking about Chargers winning the Super Bowl and talking about the Colts and team that, boy, you really don't want to face the Colts. They're coming on. Well, you're not going to have to face the Colts, it turns out, because they're not in the playoffs. I mean, absolute craziness how it's all shook out. My Tennessee Titans, well, they got the number 1 seed, so we'll see how that goes. They're going to get Derrick Henry back. This is a team, coach, and I'm a little bit of a homer, so take this with a big grain of salt. But this is a team that has a chance to really make a deep run in the playoffs.
There is no question that they have the ability, they have the players, they have the skill set to do some serious damage. If Derrick Henry is even close to 100%, they definitely have a chance. People said that we were crazy. On my show, The Early Edge, powered by Sportsline, we're there every single day. We do live shows before every single big NFL game. They told us we were crazy on Sunday when I said, listen, here's a scenario that if the Colts lose in Jacksonville, what, coach? Lose in Jacksonville? Yes, because they never play well there. Ever. Historically, they don't play well in Jacksonville. So we gave the numbers. We gave out the trends. Oh, you're nuts. Jacksonville's terrible. There's no way they can beat the Colts. Well, guess what happened? Not only did they beat them, they looked like the better team, beating them by 15 points when the Colts were a 15-point favorite. So now you go to Sunday night, and here was the crazy part. Is that if the Colts lost, then if the Raiders and Chargers tied, they would both make it to the playoffs.
Right.
So you get down to the end of the game, and we found out afterwards that the Raiders were going to kneel down until Brandon Staley, who's too smart for his own good, the millennial head coach for the Chargers, he calls a timeout. Why? Why are you calling a timeout? You got less than 40 seconds to go. There's no way you have time to get the ball back and drive down into field goal position. So the only play you have is to play for the tie. And he didn't do that. And because of that, the Chargers sitting at home and the Raiders win their 4th straight, and they go into the playoffs now, and they do not have to play the Kansas City Chiefs the first round, which is what they would have had to do if they would have tied. And now the Steelers have to go to Arrowhead instead of the Raiders. So that was a big difference for the Raiders, but the whole scenario was crazy, and I'm here for it. And if Week 18 is going to give us that every week, damn it, Ned, I want it.
I am in, all in. I kept saying, Neil, just Neil. What are you doing?
That's all you got to do. It's all you got to do. It's all you got to do.
What are you looking at this weekend from some of the games? Because there's some interesting matchups.
There really, really are. When you look at, it's the first year ever that we're going to have 2 games on Saturday. We're going to have 3 games on Sunday, and then we're going to have, wait for it, a game on Monday. We're going to have the Cardinals and the Rams. Now, is that
a good game too?
It is a good game, but it begs the question: does that put them in a negative scenario? Because they're going to have one less day to prepare than the other teams are going to have. Now, you don't want to hear a playoff team complain, but every time you have a Monday night game during the regular season, that's always a storyline. How will they bounce back on a short week of rest? So that needs to be set. But Steelers at the Chiefs seem like one of those situations where it's just the Chiefs get in, get out. There's no way at all that you are going to beat the Chiefs. So we don't even need to talk about them. Here's the game that I like a lot. The Raiders and the Bengals. It's the first game on Saturday, 4:30 Eastern time. The Bengals are really good. Is this going to be the coronation for Joe Burrow into the playoffs for the very first time? Or will the Raiders continue to defy the odds and win their fifth straight game and continue on? I don't know. How about the Patriots and Bills? That's the second game on Saturday night. Who would have thought that two AFC East behemoths, and the Bills were supposed to be the team, Ned, that was going to be the Super Bowl favorite. Now they're Jekyll and Hyde. You never know what you're going to get from game to game. That game really interests me. But here's the one that I like the most. 49ers and Cowboys meeting for the first time in the playoffs since 1994. And the Cowboys haven't done anything in the playoffs since 1997. And you're going to have these two teams. The 49ers shocked the world last week, down 17 to the Rams. Come back, win, and make it into the playoffs and make the Rams play the Cardinals instead of something else. So those are the games I'm looking at, but bet the 49ers. I think the Cowboys, once again, despite a really good regular season, they're going to have disappointment. I think San Francisco goes to Dallas, getting the points, 3, and wins it on the field.
That's why you're the coach. That's why you're the man when it comes to laying down some money on these games. Hey, you said you were doing some live shows. Again, you are all over the place. Tell us where we can watch you.
Yeah, so go to Sportsline on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us there. Then we also have a very popular YouTube channel. That's where all of our content resides. So even if you can't watch it live, you can watch every single show that we do on demand. We're there every single day at 10 a.m. And then this weekend, Saturday, 2 live 1-hour shows right before both games. Sunday, 3 different 1-hour shows. And then Monday, we'll have a 1-hour show before the big game Monday night as well. So the best thing to do, turn on those notifications. So every time we start a show, your phone will ding and you can come over and watch them. That's the easiest way to do it.
Coach, you, as they say, are a media mogul nowadays. You're going to have your own damn network before we know, man. Congratulations on all the success, and looking forward to working with you here on Breaking Even, but also on PGA Tour and PGA Tour Live. We're going to spend some time together this year. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a great year. It's going to be a big year. So everybody listening at home, help us build this podcast, Breaking Even, but also let's just lift everybody up together because it's going to be a fun year on the PGA Tour and chopping it up right here.
Man, you said it all when you said it. Thanks, Coach.
You got it.
Breaking Even is brought to you by Risk Reversal Media. You can find us at riskreversal.com and check out our podcast, On the Tape. Each week, Guy Adami, Danny Moses, and me, Dan Nathan, discuss the biggest market-moving headlines and chat with some of the most influential people on Wall Street, all in an effort to help our listeners make smarter investment decisions. So follow us On the Tape in your preferred podcast store.
You know, it's funny, sometimes this podcast, this Breaking Even, takes me to some interesting locations, but never as interesting as the people with whom I get to speak. I am actually on the beach on the 16th hole. The famous W trees are right behind me, but way more curious and interesting than that is my man, Guy Adami. Guy, I wish you were here with me, pal.
Yeah, you don't mean that, but I appreciate that. You know, you mentioned those W trees. One of the funniest movies in the history of mankind was It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and they all meet under the W tree. So when you say that, I immediately think of Ethel Merman and Sid Caesar and Mickey Rooney. I mean, it was a hysterical movie. I encourage you all to go to your local Blockbuster out there on the islands and check it out.
Hey, you know what's so funny about that is these trees were planted in 2010 here at Wailea Country Club, and they were at the suggestion of a member who referenced that exact movie. And so they put these trees in as a reference to the movie, and of course, Wailea, the W, it all makes sense.
There you go. See, so I'm not that far off there, Ned. Great to see you. Obviously, the audience isn't seeing you, but I get to see your handsome face, and it's unshaven. You're looking sexy as always.
Oh, well, something like that. I don't actually start working till Thursday, so even though while I'm kind of working doing my research, I don't shave till it's game time, you know?
I'm with you on that. And as long as you don't play for the New York Yankees, you're fine. But I get the feeling, in case the audience wants to know, the Yankees might be very close. We'll see what happens post walkout or whatever they're dealing with now they have this mandate, this ethos of no facial hair. You might see beards in the New York Yankees in the upcoming future. I'm just putting it out there, Ned.
I think the Yankees got to stay clean.
I agree.
I don't think they're going to be breaking this stalemate anytime. Baseball is so laden with this is how we do it, and we're always going to do it this way kind of folks that things don't get done quickly. Anyway, at least my Braves this time got the World Series in. Remember, it was like 94, 92, 93, whatever it was, the year that we had the strike. They would have won the series by a mile, but we got it in this time. Hey, first of all, I want to congratulate you for making me some money and hopefully making our listeners some money on this idea that you all had. It's been 2 or 3 weeks now to buy puts on the XLK, but then also buy some Amazon. So you're kind of hedging out. The XLKs that I bought were at 7. I sold them at 17. So beers on Guy Adami.
First of all, congratulations. It's interesting you say that. So you made the decision. We might have led you down and given you some information or some advice or just a way to think, but you inevitably and you invariably pulled the trigger. So it's on you. Congratulations to you. And just so the audience understands, when we throw these letters out, the XLK is the S&P 500 technology sector ETF. And I don't want to get all wonky here, but obviously they're components of an ETF. They're individual stocks. This ETF specifically is very heavy in 2 names specifically. Apple is 24% of the ETF, and Microsoft is 21%. And if you were to throw in NVIDIA at 5%, basically half of this ETF is in 3 names. So in a lot of ways, when you bought those puts, you were betting on those 3 stocks specifically to go lower, and that's pretty much what happened. But now if you look at the XLK specifically, and you did a great job with this, Ned, I mean, each time it's gotten down to this sort of 165 level, and as we're taping this now, it's at 168, and that's happened now 4 different times since November. It has bounced, and each bounce subsequently has created a new all-time high. My instincts suggest that maybe we're in for a bounce again, but your next question is, do I have an opportunity to reload and try to put this trade on again? And I think the answer to that is absolutely yes, you do. I just don't think now is the time. I think there's probably going to be a bounce. I think the market is due for a little bit of a relief rally, as they say, given the last couple of weeks. But I think the trade premise that we talked about a week or so ago has not changed. The only thing that has changed is the price action.
So does that mean if I were super aggressive, and again, I'm not saying that I am, but would I play the bounce, buy some calls on it? And if so, like what level am I looking at? And then as the reverse, when this relief rally.
Now you're playing at the $100 table, as they say. So there's a saying, and now people's eyes are going to glaze over, but we used to say, buy the double, sell the double. And effectively what that means is when you're short something, in other words, when you're long those puts, you had a great trade, traded down, and not only could you cover those puts and make money, you could then actually get long the index playing for the bounce. I mean, now you're really playing with fire, and in a good way. And I think you're right in your assertion that, if there is going to be a bounce, what do I do? Well, I think the strike level to look at if you're buying calls is somewhere between 175 and 180 in the XLK, as I mentioned earlier, trading now about 168. But if it were to get back to that 180 level, obviously you're going to do well with those calls. Then you could sell those calls out to answer your question and then buy those puts again and continue to do that as long as the market allows. At a certain point, this range we're in is going to break one way or the other. But right now, that's what we're in, a range.
Leads me to the next question. See, you know what you're doing here. You're just tying into the next segment. Okay, so if it is in a range, it's going to break one way or the other. It feels like most sentiment is that it's going to be on the negative side. It's going to be 10% pullback late January into February. Are you believing that?
Yeah, a lot of people think that. I know you listen to Tom Lee. We've had Mike Wilson on as well. So a lot of strategists or a lot of economists, whatever word you want to use, they think the first quarter half of 2022 is going to be volatile. And by definition, it means it's going to be a little dicey on the downside. I'm one of those people that believe that as well. And I think you're starting to see glimmers of that over the last couple of weeks. Now, the counter trend rallies that we've seen over the last few days have been really fierce. But those rallies typically take place when markets are going lower. Markets will go down, and then every once in a while you see a rally seemingly out of nowhere. And that's, for a golf adage, that's sort of par for the course. And they feel painful, like, oh, my God, we're back in this. But, those are typically the rallies now to sell. And I mention that because Again, not looking to make people's eyes glaze over, but we have seen a paradigm shift, and we've seen it this week specifically, but we've seen over the last couple of weeks. The Federal Reserve, which has been steadfast in the camp of the market vis-a-vis their policies, has now shifted course, has changed their narrative. And it would be, I think it's logical to suggest that the market should change course as well. So when you say there's a 10 to 15% downdraft coming, I happen to agree with you. Therefore, that XLK, which has held 165 a number of times, might be extraordinarily vulnerable on a close below it.
Yeah, so is that a buy puts on the XLK? Is that a buy puts on the triple Q? Is that a buy puts on the SPY? I mean, is it across the board 10% type of deal? Whatever the percent is it across the board, or do you think it's going to be specific to one?
No, that's a great question, Ned. So when I say 10 to 15%, I'm specifically talking about the S&P 500. Now, the calculus that you have to make is, okay, if the broader market in the form of the S&P 500 went down 10 to 15%, what's going to happen to the more levered sectors like the XLK? Is that going to, if the broader market's down 10, does that mean the XLK goes down 20, 25? And I think that's a logical, I don't think that's a bridge too far. Like, I think that's a logical next step to say, you know what? If Ned Michaels thinks the market's going down 10%, it's logical to think that the XLK is vulnerable to the tune of 20 to 25%. With that said, you have to have some sort of lines in the sand. And, you're in the midst of a small bounce here in the XLK off that 165 level. How much of a bounce is left in it? And you don't want to be too cute with these things, but as long as you have your levels in mind, I think then the trade is sort of done for you. It's better to be, they say this, you got to be prepared when you go into this thing, because if you're unprepared, you're just setting up for disaster.
Yes, I sometimes get the right theme, but not the right levels. And at some point, you don't know when to get in and get out. Might as well just not get in at all. So having the levels is really helpful. So thank you for giving us the levels, at least in your estimation. I want to ask you about NVIDIA, because this is one of my bigger holdings. It's down like 20% from its highs around 330, and it's down in 270, 280 mark. How do you protect against something? It doesn't necessarily have to be NVIDIA. I'm just using it because, again, this is a selfish show that I'm trying to benefit from. So if it's already down 20%, do I think it could go down more?
I mean, if you go back and look at NVIDIA, in terms of when people really started talking about it in earnest, you have seen significant downdrafts, and I'm sure you're very well aware of it. I mean, we saw one, obviously, like everything else, in February, that huge downdraft for all the stocks. I mean, that stock got eviscerated. But you also saw it in February of last year when the stock went from, I think, 150 or so down to 110 or so. I mean, you can do that math in terms of percentage moves. And we saw another move of that magnitude in the summer when the stock went from about 230. I think it traded down to about 190 or so. So you have seen moves of this magnitude before. Each time subsequently has been an opportunity to get long the stock. As you correctly mentioned, this stock just made an all-time high, I want to say around Thanksgiving, of 346 and change. And here we are about 280 or so. So the question you're asking me is how much more room is left on the downside? Well, you're trying to now figure out what's a logical level. And I think you're getting close, but I don't think you're there yet. And if we're in this, again, to use the term paradigm shift of stocks with high growth, high valuations being sold off, NVIDIA will not be spared. So in your mind, you have to say, okay, I own the stock. It has sold off. I'm probably not going to pull the trigger here now in terms of getting out, but where do I add more? I think that's where you're sort of struggling with now. And I think the logical answer is the prior all-time high in the stock was in the fall of 2021, I think $235 or so, which is about $40 or so from where we currently are. That is a logical place of the next huge area of support. So 235 should be a level that, if it gets down to, would be a great entry point.
If it goes down to 235, I'm going to be puking on myself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. And that's going to be like the visceral reaction. But in essence, you should be saying, okay, here's another one of these opportunities that we've seen a number of times over the last few years. What we try to do in this, very difficult to do, by the way, and it's the same thing in professional sports. Yeah. I think some of the best athletes are the ones that are able to temper their emotions and to take emotion out of it. Now, every once in a while, I think emotion helps, and you see it with Tiger Woods, you see it with some of the greats, but over the course of the long term, being emotional constantly is only going to work against you. So try to take that emotion out of it when you're looking at these stocks and try to be sort of reasonable and say, okay, I see what's just happened. I'm in the midst of something now. Where will I add more to a stock that I still believe in? Because the fundamental story of NVIDIA has not changed.
This is fascinating. So I want to tell you a quick story about our coverage last week from the Tournament of Champions out in Maui. Justin Thomas, who was a two-time champion at that golf course, the Plantation Course Kapalua, who has more rounds in the 60s over the past 7 years in Hawaii than anybody, more eagles than anybody in Hawaii. I mean, he was a short pick to win the thing, and he shoots 1 over in the first round. So you're thinking, well, he's out, because this is a course that eventually 34 under won. And then he goes and he breaks the course record, shoots 61 a couple rounds later. And he said, I find this so interesting what you're talking about, is he said, I just hadn't had my run yet. So I had to stay patient because I knew I was going to have my run. And when he did, it was record setting. And he ended up finishing in the top 10 and was close to the lead there for a minute. So there's the parallel between the story you're telling that NVIDIA could face. I just saw it personified in a golfer in Justin Thomas last week. He was just waiting on his run. But in the meantime, he had a really awful, terrible round. But if you could have bought him at that point, you would have been killing it a couple days later.
That's exactly right. And, I think the greats are able to, and this is true in all walks of life. I think they're able to we're all emotional creatures as human beings. I totally get that. And it's very difficult to do, but the greats are able to sort of take that chip and sort of put it on the shelf for a period of time. And they're able to sort of see through things. And I think in terms of, what you want to accomplish as a trader, I think you have to do it because you accomplished it on the golf course. And the skill sets are remarkably similar. It's the discipline, it's the preparation, it's all those things. The only difference is, you're able to maintain that even keel on the golf course. And for whatever reason it is, maybe because now it's about your money or something else, or maybe something you're not as familiar with, emotion finds its way into investing and trading. If you can somehow extract it and just sort of look and gain clarity, I think you'd be much better off.
Well, it's pretty easy to gain clarity when this is your backdrop.
Something. Now, the folks can't see that, but that's obviously the vista of the Pacific Ocean. You're underneath the W trees. You're in Hawaii. I'm in a 13-degree Morristown, New Jersey. Somebody's doing something right and somebody's doing something wrong. I'll let the audience decide.
Guy Adami, you're the best, man. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to jump on with me, breaking even, and helping us understand the markets and putting it in context that we can understand as athletes. This is the idea behind the show, so thanks a lot.
And you're making it happen, Ned. Thank you. Enjoy yourself out there.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Even with me, Ned Michaels. If you like what you heard, make sure you hit follow in the podcast store and leave us a review. It helps people find our show. Follow us on Twitter at Breaking Even Pod, or you can also find me at Ned Michaels. And remember, we'll be back next Thursday for more Breaking Even, which is brought to you by Visit Mississippi. Jump online, visit Mississippi.org. See everything that's going on down there.